This is a theory I call the Wilber-Combs-Simpson Matrix. It's inclusive of the Wilber-Combs matrix, but adds a new layer to it, a new level, or a couple new levels, in my opinion, of dimensionality. The idea that's central to this is that there's a reoccurring pattern to development, and part of the reason I have included spiral dynamics stages from beige, inclusive of all the way up to what I call vermilion up here, is because I think there's a pattern that's occurring that spiral dynamics pointed to, that Wilber's new model doesn't really direct itself towards. So Wilber does talk about in his series Cosmic Consciousness about the notion that the chakras have within them at least a couple different layers, gross, subtle, and causal. And he further breaks down in Cosmic Consciousness that the subtle state also has etheric, psychic, and astral elements to it. And then there's the causal and to some extent the non-dual, which, might be argued whether or not it's a state or not, but I've included it in this process because it kind of works to make this whole thing clear. Oftentimes there's a seventh chakra in the theory, and it's said to have curled up within it 7 to 12 states or stages within it. I'm arguing that what those are is actually these higher stations that are unfolded through the process of development. And so it's really 6 on 6, and the 7th is just a reoccurring pattern that occurs arguably within this. That's what my argument is, at least here. So we have down here, kind of below the chart, as just a very simple, suggestive pattern that will be included in the higher stages. But it's physical to kind of plant life, to essentially reptile, to mammalian. And then I've put spiral dynamics 1, spiral dynamics 2, tier 1 and 2. And, I'm arguing that these are the first 4 tiers, and that spiral dynamics 1 is actually the 5th tier. Spiral dynamics tier 2 is actually the 6th tier. And that these first 4 tiers parallel the physical, the etheric, the astral, or the psychic and the astral. And so those 4 states correlate with these stages that are kind of curled up in a certain sense in our development. We really kind of start in the first tier for the most part. But notice here that beige has kind of a survival orientation, and purple kind of has sort of a vital orientation. Red sort of has a power orientation. Blue sort of has a meaning, kind of love orientation. Orange sort of has an objective, scientific orientation. And green sort of has an interobjective orientation. And that these correlate with, in a certain sense, the states of consciousness. So the first 3 are kind of gross oriented. It's sort of, they're curled up within waking state in a certain sense. The 4th one has kind of a dream, is kind of correlative with the dream state, in my opinion, the astral state, love, intersubjectivity. And the 5th kind of has a correlation with the causal, sort of objective awareness. And the 6th has kind of a non-dual, integrated awareness. But notice that we wouldn't typically consider green to be non-dual, or integrated rather. But it's, in my opinion, integrated within the context of this 5th tier, which is kind of flatland in comparison to the 6th tier, which is itself integrated. 6 on 6. It's actually the 6th tier of the sixth stage. These 6 stages are within the 6th tier in this theory. So they, again, yellow is kind of survival oriented in my opinion. Turquoise is kind of vital oriented. Coral is kind of power oriented. Indigo is kind of love oriented. But notice that any of these stages again can be occurring within any of these states. So they're all open. All of these here are open to possibilities. It's just that these yellow ones highlighted are kind of the primary focus. So typically, in my opinion, you get saints within the kind of blue stage, you get sages within kind of that orange stage, and you get non-dualists within kind of the green stage. And then I'm arguing that, in the 2nd tier, we'll kind of get pagans / yogis kind of within that early domain. But to go kind of beyond this map, kind of go outside of this map, I'm arguing that this whole pattern is taking place sort of within the 3rd dimension. Stephen Hawking, for example, argues that perhaps, our universe got started with 2-dimensional membranes smashing into each other to cause a big bang, which was 3rd dimensional. Now, I'm not sure. I question some of the physics that Hawking talks about, but if that's the case, and this 6th tier would be the end of this 6-on-6 pattern. So past vermilion, which is the 5th stage of the 6th tier, there would be one more stage above it, and then outside of that, we would get arguably a parallel with the astral state, the 4th subtle, what we typically call the subtle state itself. And so it would be, intersubjective oriented. You could perhaps, this is just highly speculative, but be able to take directly the perspective of another, embody the other, and this sort of makes sense when we look at what haptic technology and virtual reality is coming down the pipeline. This very well, Kurzweil argues around 2045 we'll have a singularity. I'm not saying that that's the case. I don't know, but if these patterns are happening at a quicker and quicker pace, which they seem to be happening, the stages rather, beige took 50,000 years to develop, purple took 20,000 years, red 5,000, blue 2,000, so there's an exponential increase in so I'm saying that these final ones, that's why I included indigo and vermilion on this map, is because I think if this 6-on-6 pattern is happening, these stages have probably already opened up, and so, or to some extent, and so we could be talking about a technological singularity that it moves us into the 4th modality of the kind of astral subtle. Whereas now we're kind of primary focus is in this I orientation, this individual orientation. I hope that made some sense. Be well.